True.
But some people feel a pressure about
That's
that.
what I'm
like,
saying.
I don't even want to think
That's
about
what
it.
I'm saying.
Yeah.
And it's almost like when you start to, this is how a lot of burnout happens. They say burnout's more emotional than it necessarily is a physical thing, because how you're managing your stress and challenges and success. But it's like when you get into that cycle and that loop of one success, I need to have a next one, and this is never going to end, especially right now.
Yeah.
I mean, you've even talked about this to our staff.
Well, so this is a how-to. Okay, I'm going to give you a little how-to that may solve
Sure.
the why. I don't think about January and February in December to be able to cast vision. I go away for 3 days and I map out my whole year. And when I need to think about what's coming next, I just refer to my pre-work. So I can actually, it doesn't take much to say, what's January? Oh yeah, here's January, guys. Like, it's on my map. I don't have to carry that emotionally if I've mapped it out. Now, if you're flying by impulse, and what are we going to do next? And what are we going to do next? Well, then, yeah, you will feel emotionally exhausted. But if you at least have someone in your organization to help you build a vision map for your year, and there's rhythms with it, and you don't actually have to think about it that much because your organization has rhythms, then those rhythms tend to determine what you talk about what's coming next without you having to carry it around all the time. So there are some people, and I think you probably fit into this category, who like to feel inspired by their work, okay? But you don't actually have to be inspired to succeed. You can, in a non-emotive way, talk about the next thing, even though inside your heart you're like, I don't even care right now. I'm so tired. I don't want to think about it. But you can still put a smile on your face and say, by the way, what's coming up next is such and such and such and such. And it is just a discipline. It isn't an inspirational discipline. It's just a discipline. So you might be judging or misjudging yourself based upon the fact that sometimes you just don't have enough inspiration for the future. And that's okay. That's where you can cut yourself a break and just flow with the disciplines and routines of the rhythm.
Well, and I can even say that from my experience, it's not a painful thing for me to plan for the future without inspiration. I think what gets painful is when I get closer and I have to execute and still don't have the inspiration, and it doesn't usually come until shortly before, because that's how I tend to operate. I feel like my creativity juices really get going the closer I get to that deadline. And artificially doing that doesn't help me because I know it's not real. You know what I mean? So yeah, sometimes pressure can kind of come as our own making. But I do understand what you're saying. I think with a little bit of foresight, we can maybe give ourselves some backbone that helps the pressure to not weigh so heavily on our shoulders.
Yeah, so you asked this question, when is what I'm doing ever going to be enough? When you feel, you're under incredible pressure, you pulled off a successful event. The idea of having to muster that amount of energy to do it again feels like, oh my goodness, how am I going to do this? This is where I think this is another how, okay? And you and I have talked about this interpersonally. People like yourself are great people to follow. I mean, to follow a person who feels the excitement of it and they're riding it and they're inspired and they're like pumped and this is great. You're wonderful to follow. If you have an administrative assistant next to you who can, when your inspiration dies down, keep the ship steady.
Yeah.
So that you can say, look, I'm tapped. Right. I need to go away for a minute.
Yeah.
And you run it. Make sure that when I come back, we're still on the road. Yeah, okay. Yeah. And so you just need to know who you are, in order to. And everybody has strengths and weaknesses in this journey, and you kind of need to know who you are, and who you need to be around, because that's an exhaustion. When you ask that question, that's an emotional exhaustion question, and. Here's another challenge, and that is when you have a leader over you, supervising you, who likes to think about the next thing right away, and they want to have a conversation. So you're out of inspiration.
You're the executor. Yeah.
They want to have a conversation with you, like, let's talk about what went well, and then what's coming next for you. I want to see your goals, and you're like, I don't want to talk about that right now. But you have a supervisor who has an expectation of you, and they want to critique you when you're tired to help you improve. So this is the good kind of constructive criticism. And we receive that through the filter of our exhaustion. And then it just feels like, I just want to give up. I wish I could just quit. I want to do another job. maybe I should resign. Maybe I should go to another church. Maybe I shouldn't be in the ministry at all. All these questions start to be triggered when we really haven't worked out a firm perspective of ourselves. Because you're now really talking about a theology of you in light of all the people around you and the ministry and God's expectations and all the things that are happening. And so coming back to some truths about yourself are what ground you in those moments when you just want to throw your hands in the air and give up.
Yeah.
So you got to know the answer. Is this enough for God? Yeah, I think it is. Is God okay if I pause and enjoy this moment? He absolutely is. In fact, it would be wrong for you not to. Is it enough for my supervisor? Maybe not yet. So now I have to manage their expectations so that I don't have to live under pressure, but I'm achieving what they're asking me to. Is it enough for my worst critic who just wants to destroy me? No, but honestly, they're the least person I should be listening to right now because they would criticize me no matter what happened. Is it enough for me? That's where the real big question
I think there's
comes.
probably also you mentioned an extreme case of someone who is out to destroy you. But there's probably just a lot of disgruntled people. I noticed that when I was in youth ministry, a lot of disgruntled parents. And that's tough to deal with, and sometimes it was rightly so. But there are some of those critical voices. So, okay, you kind of did a really good segue into maybe this other portion that I think is important to figure out. So if one of our core values is multiplication, at least at Allison Park Church, maybe for some of our listeners who are in other networks as well, and we want to personally be growing as disciples of Christ, being discipled by somebody else, how do you get comfortable or cope with the pressures or the discomfort or the stress or exhaustion of growing personally and being exposed to your weaknesses without it feeling like an attack, or maybe somebody doesn't say it perfectly. They say it in a way that makes you feel really crappy about yourself, and it's something you've been working on, but they don't think you've seen enough progress, or maybe your performance isn't high enough, but it's when someone else is trying to trigger growth, either personally or through what you're leading. How do you get comfortable with that? How do you adapt to that? How can that become normal?
Okay, I'm going to give you an answer you're not going to expect. All right?
Yeah.
So I actually think multiplication happens way more when we focus on other people than on ourselves. So I think the answer is, if I want to be a reproducing leader, I need to forget about myself for a minute, and I need to give the persons around me, especially the persons that are younger than me in Christ or younger in age, I need to give them what I wish other people were giving me. So I need to invest in their success, believe in them, encourage them, prophesy to them, be there for them, cultivate what's going on in their life, and actually enjoying the success of others and investing in it takes the focus off of me. Because a lot of times we can get into this hypercritical, am I enough? Am I doing good enough? How am I succeeding? Am I not succeeding? And it just helps to shift the focus off of you and to multiply by just simply being an encouragement to people around you.
Can I ask a question? Because I don't know if I understand how that relates. So you get something from your mentor, boss, supervisor, whatever, something. Here's something that you need to grow in, whether they deliver that well or they don't. And maybe you're still in the process of even evaluating, like, are they right? Do I agree? Is this, and so you're there. You're talking about investing what you wish you had invested into others. I don't understand how you go from that moment.
When I became the pastor at Allison Park Church in 1991, my job was to help Allison Park Church be healthy and to grow. And I had people in my life that were looking at how I was performing, my board and other people who were critical or encouraging to me. My success as the lead pastor at Allison Park Church had nothing to do with church planting. Church planting was somewhat counter to my goals as an organization because we were sending people away. I took time out of my normal development organizationally to believe in Pat Summers and Russ Horn and other people like that. And I invested in them, and I actually spoke to them the way I wish the people on my board and in my life would speak to me. And I helped them with their goals in the way that I wish other people were helping me with my goals. And when I put the focus on helping somebody else and serving them, it actually caused me to multiply. So it wasn't my trajectory as a leader that made me multiply. It was my investment in others and their success that made the multiplication happen. Because you can be an effective person in your role and not be multiplying. You can be growing in character and growing in skill and not be multiplying. Multiplication only happens when you start to speak into the lives of other people. And so I think in some ways these are two different concepts. And it's actually healthy when you get off of yourself.
What are two different concepts?
Personal success and multiplication.
But personal growth is not necessarily the same as personal success.
I think personal growth and multiplication are two different things. So you put it in the context of multiplication, but I think multiplication is a skill that may not necessarily have anything to do with personal growth. You could be becoming more organized and more disciplined and a better vision caster and a better executor and event planner, and all of your personal performance can be producing personal results in your context. It may not necessarily multiply more Dave Leaks. Multiplication is when you help somebody who looks at you and says, boy, I would like to do what Dave's doing and become more like what Dave is, or you help them get imparted to them the anointing, success, and gifting that God has put on your life. Multiplication is when you spread that.
Okay, so let me counter then. Let me tell you why I attached this thought. And if you want to say that's fine. But let me tell you where I came to this from. I would imagine in order to disciple others or to mentor, you have to be able to be mentored or be discipled.
Sure.
There's an element of teachability and personal growth that I see there. It's a part of the multiplication process to be invested into, to invest out. So when I think about my journey and the journey of others that I've talked to that are younger leaders, there is this constant element of dealing with, you're getting feedback or criticism that can feel heavy and it feels exhausting. And what I'm asking is in order to see multiplication, doesn't there have to be this process of you grow and then you help others to grow? Because you're saying, well, if somebody says something to you, then you just sort of, put that over to the side for a second and help others grow. But how do you do that if you're not growing yourself, right? Isn't that a part of this whole conversation? Like multiplication means personally growing so that you can grow others?
Yeah, sure. And again, I'll observe you, Dave, so since you brought yourself into the conversation.
Yeah, sure.
So what I watch from you is that you naturally tend to do for other leaders what you want done for yourself. You're always raising up leaders around you. Okay, you're saying, I think you'd be great at this. You're recruiting them in. You're coaching them. You're encouraging them. And everything that comes from your voice to others to help them grow, whether that's a criticism to help them improve or that's encouragement in something they've succeeded in, that all feels incredibly authentic to who you are. And every time you're involved in mentoring or discipling somebody else, you feel unbelievable fulfillment. There is nothing icky about the conversations that you have to invest in others. But when you're receiving it from somebody, you what it appears to me is amplify the negativity that comes from a person of authority that speaks into your life. I
personally do.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that what you might say to somebody else, if somebody said, look, you preach too long, and they said that to you, you would receive that with an amplification. If you said it to somebody else you were developing, hey, you preach too long, it would have no emotional value on you. You would be like, I just told them they preached too long. What's the big deal? So coming out of you, it's like natural. Like, of course that needed to be said. Coming to you, it's like, oh my goodness, I'm such a failure.
So
right?
this is exactly where I want to land.
Very much how a lot of people feel.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Okay, so that's the part of multiplication that I'm talking about,
Yes.
right? That it's easier to say than it is to receive it.
So now the question is, how can I receive criticism in a way that doesn't derail me
or crush me or make me feel just like I'm a failure? Because that's the skill that I was wanting to talk to. I think it is attached to one of our values.
Sure.
Which I think is multiplication.
So let's ask that question then. How can you receive, Dave, the things that are being said to you without it feeling like it's crushing you? Because our organization is a high coach organization. We want to constantly be speaking into people's lives. We're trying to say positives and giving people some things to work on. And if everybody in the organization feels this magnification of the negative, then it's difficult for the regular kinds of multiplying conversations to happen, because everything said to me is like, come on, when will it ever be enough? I'm never going to be good enough for you. You're always saying negative things to me.
Yes. Okay, this is what I was trying to hit. You're like, it's a different conversation. I was like, I don't think it is. Yeah. So you're asking me personally,
So how would you want it to be received if you were talking to somebody?
Yeah. Well, I can talk to this. I can speak to this too. I think timing is really important. So Sarah, my wife, will give me feedback on my messages, and I hate when she does it on Sunday Rapture. If we're driving home and she tells me, "Hey, this thing, I can't hear it on a Sunday."
Unless it's positive, right?
If it's positive, I'm like, just tell me only the good stuff, and you can tell me the bad stuff later. Because I do. I go through a process of reviewing.
Timing, that's very good.
Okay, so timing is a big one for me. I think another really big one, this is a whole other concept, but it's something that I've really valued. I'm actually reading a book right now by a guy named Adam Grant. It's called Think Again. And it's this idea of we need to think like scientists, where we're okay with being wrong and having our initial first impression or idea not be right. A lot of us, including myself, it's our instinct to fight for our own ideas because there's at least something right about it, but it's really healthy to question yourself. So I think with feedback, it's really healthy to go in assuming I can learn from anybody, and this person might know more than I do.
Okay.
And even if they don't know as much as I do about this particular subject, I'm an expert on blank, and I don't know if they are, they might have something that I can grow from. Okay. So it's questioning your own assumptions, I think, is a part of it.
That doesn't help you much emotionally, though.
No, that's hard.
So timing,
that's a mental framework.
Timing is one, and that approach to criticism is one. I think there's something beyond that, though.
Yeah.
Right. So what else? So that it's not crushing to you.
Yeah, it's because I was going to say humility is a part of it, but that's not what helps it to not feel so weighted. I think what I can do in the right frame of mind that helps it not feel weighty but feels good is whenever I look at this in the scope of this is the only way I can become a better me. This is the only so whenever I'm like intentionally looking for it, I want to. So I actually go out of my way to find criticism. I really do. I try to ask people and put myself in a place of where I can hear, I don't like how this was done. I think we should do this instead. Because I think seeking it out kind of braces you differently.
Sure.
I think sometimes it's like if you only ever receive it when you're not asking for it. It's a lot harder because you're not actually in that mindset of looking for it.
But even when you're asking for it, it still can be crushing.
It can, but for me at least, I at least feel like, okay, I'm ready for this, and I'm looking forward to some of the results I know will come from this.
Well, I think one thing that if you're a supervisor or a mentor, you have to do, and that is massively encourage for the one thing you're asking for somebody to work on. So 10 to 1, right? 10 positives to 1 negative. And then after you're done giving 10 positives, give 10 again. Remind them. So we talk about your performance now because I'm the lead pastor and you're a campus pastor. And almost every one of our conversations about this recently, I have said to you, you're doing great. Here's my way of measuring how you're doing in a reboot situation. And I give you income is better than I thought it would be. Numbers are better than I thought it would be. Your staff is growing. And then I look at your face and you're like, yeah, I still feel like it sucks. Right? Okay. So it's not that you're hearing negativity. And then we might talk about one technique that you could change, but you already are starting the conversation sometimes. And this is not just true of you. I think it's true of a lot of people.
Yeah, sure.
With the conviction that something is deeply wrong, right? I'm probably messing up. And now you're going to say something to me and it's going to trigger what I already believe deep down inside, which is that I'm probably not competent enough. And now it's just exposed. So a lot of times we are coaching people who start at a deficit. They are already convinced that they're a failure. And so in our conversations, we're saying, let's evaluate how did those go? And we look at it very objectively and scientifically. And did that work? Could that have been better? Let's see where we can change this. And yet deep down inside, in the gut, it's like, I probably am a failure. And so I think we as coaches and leaders have to realize this is spiritual warfare. Every time I coach somebody, I'm doing spiritual warfare. I have to combat the lies of the enemy, the lies of the devil that undermine someone's sense of self, because the devil will use criticism given in slightly the wrong way or at the wrong time or with the wrong tone against that person, and will make them want to throw their hands up in the air and say, when is what I'm doing ever going to be enough? I might as well just quit. I don't want to see their face anymore. I don't want to talk to anybody about this. Because there is, I think, an underlying strategy that the powers of evil have against all leaders, and that is to make them want to give up. Mm-hmm. And so, I mean, I pressed on something there. Is that true that sometimes there is a conviction that I'm probably failing, and no matter what the positivities are, it can trigger that?
Yeah, I don't know if I would phrase it like that.
Okay.
But yeah, I think there's something what you're saying is resonating. I think yeah, like, so my temperament is not to be really confident usually about what I'm doing.
So most
right?
people have massive self-doubt.
Uh-huh.
I think 8 out of 10
right.
have massive self-doubt. The other 2 are delusional. Right?
Or at least a little delusional.
Yeah, they're like way overconfident. And
yeah,
for them,
I know
like,
what I'm doing. Yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so, but 8 out of 10 are like, yeah, I probably am way worse than what anybody knows. If anybody knew what I was really thinking, those kinds of things. So self-doubt is a part of the problem when we're coaching people.
Yeah, that's true.
We aren't starting at ground zero. We're starting at deep down in a hole somewhere. And when we're going to deliver the remark, it's going to be received in a deficit mode. And so we have to sort of lift people out of that as we help them improve.
And as a supervisor, obviously establishing trust as someone who is deeply concerned with investing into the person you're supervising or mentoring or coaching is a huge key, because if someone questions what your motives are and whether you're just trying to get the most out of them for your product or your ministry, it's not always easy to receive those.
Sure, no doubt. And then if you're receiving the input, again, you need to have, probably there needs to be some confessions of truth that you have for yourself that you go back to when you're exhausted, when you want to give up, when you've been criticized, when you're being mentored and you start to feel that trigger, when is this ever going to be enough? You need to have the answer to that question. Here's what God has said about me. Here's what I know is true about me. So come back to the bedrock of what you know that you are in God's eyes, so that you don't let the devil use criticism against you. Because that's what often happens, is criticism is used by the power of evil against you. While God is trying to use it for you to help you grow and improve, the devil's trying to use that against you.
So to kind of wrap back around to your initial, I guess, hypothesis about this, maybe that is always true, basically, that whenever there's a fatigue statement that's like, when will what I'm doing ever be enough? It probably almost like basically always is, when will I be enough? It's always a little bit back to the I'm not this enough, I'm not that enough, this skill or competency, therefore I'm not enough. And I think as a guy, it's not so much always like, because people say like your value in Christ. It doesn't always feel like so much it's my value. That might be a way of putting it that doesn't sound like it hits me, but it is like
worth.
Yeah, something like that.
So you and everyone needs to hear on a regular basis, you're enough. You're enough. You're more than enough. You're God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus for good works. God delights in who you are. We're so happy to have you on our team. We're blessed to have you here. I mean, my goodness, what a contributor you are. Like, we need to hear the truth, not flattery, not like I'm going to tell you a bunch of smack right now, and then I'm going to lay what I really want to say on you, right? I'm going to feed you some lines here, but to genuinely say, I'm so glad you are on our team. I'm so glad that you are part of this church family. I see such potential in you. You're doing so good in these areas. Those things need to be said constantly, so that when the moment says, and you preach too long, but you know what? You just shorten that up a little bit, and you're going to be great, right? That's how it has to be. If the culture is going to be a high coach culture, then it has to be a constant affirmation culture, so that multiplication comes out of the fertile ground of faith, not out of discouragement, which often we start to lose heart. And then when you're going through a pandemic and all the other things that are going on and criticism is flying from everywhere, there's extra fatigue. So people right now, listen, if you have a pastor in your life and you're listening to this podcast, your spouse, whoever is your mentor, your leader, they need to hear 10 times as much right now because of the fatiguing nature of 2020 and 21, that they're doing okay and that they have value. And you know, probably the person that you're following, the pastor or leader, has heard more criticism for their leadership than ever in their entire life. You can guarantee that within the last 10 days, someone has either left their church, ministry, or threatened to for something that they're saying, you are not enough. So if you write them a card or a note or you speak into their life, it is like water to a thirsty man. I was going to say drowning. It's like, you know, when you're out in the desert and you just need something to drink. It's just so welcomed.
Yeah. So I guess to kind of close all this, if you are a leader feeling like this, you're going to be in your best zone, if I'm interpreting what you're saying correctly, if you are able to deal with some of your own, questions of self-worth, and to be able to rest in the fact that it's not improvement or more numbers or more success that will allow you to be valuable, but that, at least who you are as a person right now is enough for God. But that there needs to be the balance of that, but always allowing for God to continue to do new things, right? Like pushing for more without letting your current results determine how you feel about yourself.
Yeah. And I think this probably needs to be said too, and that's this, that if you could know at any given moment just how crazy God is about you, some of us, we think we're being tolerated. Like God is looking at us and saying, yeah, you're doing okay, but you really need to get at it. I would liken it like this. So the other day, I was really tired, and Melody told our daughter, Alyssa, that I was tired, and Alyssa told my granddaughter, Eden. And so Eden sent me a little video, and when I saw the video, and she was like, Papa, I hope you feel better. I got to tell you, I love that girl so much. I was on Zoom with my granddaughter, Clara Jane, and she was telling me about her day. I can't tell you how much I love Clara Jane. Let me just say that God, when he looks at you in any given moment, looks at you like I look at Eden or Clara Jane, and his heart fills with joy. Like he designed you, he made you. And you're looking at heaven, when will what I do ever be enough? And God is like, if you could just know how I really feel about you. Like, if you could just know that I am not measuring you based on your performance. You're my son, right? Just like you're my granddaughter, you're my grandson. Come on, don't you know I created you? Don't you know how much joy you cause me? How much when I look at you, I think, there's no one quite like Dave. So we are constantly assigning to God that God is somehow tolerating our existence and feeling like we're slightly falling short of our potential, and therefore he's a little disgusted with us. He just doesn't want to say it. Mm-hmm. And God is up there in heaven like, I'm so in love with you. Oh my goodness, I so think you're amazing. And do I want you to do more with your life? Yeah, because I know I've put you here on earth for a purpose. But we just have no real glimpse of how much God loves, accepts, and approves of us, even in our worst moments. Yeah. And if we could just feel a little bit of that on occasion, all of a sudden our fatigue would go away. We'd be like, you know what, it's all right. So I didn't have the numbers of people that I thought, and I preached too long, and point two sort of went crazy on me. God doesn't really care. Yeah. He's just happy that we have relationship together. And I think most people don't give God credit for how he really thinks about who we are. Yeah. If you could just get that one thing, if people could get that one thing in their mind, they could get the truth about how God really feels about us. It would revolutionize your life. Yeah. Well, that's a good way to close. Some heavy stuff, some good stuff. So hopefully this was encouraging to you. Thanks again for joining us on this latest episode. As always, if you would subscribe and share wherever you're listening or watching this, we would love to get this resource out to more people. But thanks for listening today or watching, whatever you're on, and we hope you have an amazing day. See you next time for our next episode.